There are people all over the place with what they're teaching nowadays. I've heard somebody say, well, the two witnesses, well, that's just the law and the prophets in the Old Testament. No, it's two literal men who are standing and wearing sackcloth, and they're standing in Jerusalem for 3.5 years, calling down fire from heaven, turning water to blood, bringing forth plagues. They're literal men. They're not figurative. I can't tell you how many times people say, well, those are just figurative witnesses. Read your Bible and believe it, okay?
We, the followers of Jesus Christ, believe that the rapture is an ultimate reality, and it is something that for sure will take place one day. The ones that are going to be saved will meet the Lord in the air. This will be a moment of authentic and real success for those who really believed in Jesus Christ. However, after the rapture, a series of prophetic events are believed to unfold, as outlined in the Bible, and understanding these events requires a deep dive into the scriptures, which we are going to do in this episode today. So, without any further delay, let's get right into it.
Now, this prophecy of 70 weeks is a prophecy to Israel. And that's what you got to understand. We are the church. We are not Israel. So you've got to understand that this prophecy was written to Jews. Okay? Now look at Daniel chapter 9 and verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city to, and then it goes on. Who is thy people? Daniel was a Jew. And as a Jew, Daniel is writing to Jews about a prophecy to Jews.
The 70 weeks prophecy to Israel. Now, the 70 weeks prophecy is something that we know will take place after the church age comes to an end. So we can say that the 70th week is not going to get started until the end of the church age, at which point the church will be removed from the earth in an event which we call as the Rapture. According to Robert Breaker, the 70th week of Daniel introduces a new character, the Antichrist, and brings in the tribulation era. The tribulation is a 7-year period that begins when the church is raptured and ends when Jesus returns to earth. During this time, the Antichrist will ascend to power, and the earth will face judgment. It will also be the period when God focuses his attention on the nation of Israel. According to Daniel's prophecy, the Antichrist will forge a treaty with Israel for 3.5 years before breaking it. Daniel 9:27. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Although the Antichrist will rise to authority during this period, his reign will be brief. His demise has already been predetermined and will occur at the conclusions of the tribulation. The second coming of Jesus will mark the conclusion of this 7-year period of suffering. When he arrives, he will quickly judge the Antichrist and then begin his millennial reign on earth. When he achieves this, he will bring in everlasting righteousness and anoint a most holy place, completing Daniel's 70-week prophecy. But the 7 years of tribulation are divided into 2 periods of 3.5 years each. According to Robert Breaker, the greatest catastrophe during the tribulation will occur in the last 3.5 years when the Antichrist will do his best to rule on earth and establish his throne in God's temple.
The Bible teaches that there will be 2 witnesses who will appear in Jerusalem after the rapture. And they will do what they do. They will do a ministry, and they'll have signs and miracles, but their ministry will last exactly 3.5 years. Let's read that together from the Bible. Let's go to Revelation chapter 11. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. Okay, so this is a rebuilt temple. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 40 and 2 months. 40 and 2 months is 3.5 years. Okay?
The 2 witnesses. According to Robert Breaker, there will be 2 witnesses who are going to appear first after the rapture. Now, who are these 2 witnesses, and when exactly they're going to appear? The 2 witnesses are first mentioned in Revelation 11, 2:14. When they do, they perform their ministry in the latter half of the tribulation. It is vital to note that their ministry will endure 1,260 days, which equals 42 months, or 3.5 years. The following presents 2 reasons why we know they will carry out their ministry in the latter half of the tribulation. First, it is crucial to note that Daniel 9:27 specifies the tribulation period as lasting 7 years. The tribulation begins with a peace deal, The first half of the tribulation, or 3.5 years, is peaceful. However, the second half is anything but. The last 3.5 years have been characterized by desolation and catastrophic destruction. It is important to remember that the first 3.5 years of the tribulation are peaceful. The first seal is the only other reference to the first part of the tribulation. The original seal depicts a white horse, which symbolizes peace. The rest of Revelation describes events that will occur during the last half of the tribulation, or the last 3.5 years. The other seals describe war, famine, death, the martyrs in heaven, and terror. That summarizes the last half of the tribulation. Second, the most crucial reason why these two witnesses will minister in the latter half of the tribulation is that their ministry is defined as lasting 1,260 days, 42 months, and times time and half a time. Notice that these terms add up to 3.5 years. Daniel 7:25 and Daniel 12:7 describe a period of authoritarian rule, followed by shattering the power of the holy people, that is, the power of Israel, which corresponds to the last half of the tribulation period. It is worth noting that the descriptions of the length of the two witnesses' ministries always correspond to the biblical description of the last half of the tribulation, because the last 3.5 years of the tribulation are not a time of peace. It is best to understand these time periods as corresponding to the last part of the tribulation. It is also worth noting that these expressions are only used in the book of Revelation for the latter half of the tribulation. When we examine the atrocities that will occur during the ministry of the two witnesses, we discover that they only fit into the latter half of the tribulation, not the first. For example, Revelation 11:2 says that the nations of the world will be allowed to trample the holy city for 42 months, or 3.5 years. Zechariah 14:2 prophesied that this will occur. According to Jesus, this would occur during the Great Tribulation, which happens soon before the second coming of Christ. Since Jesus mentions the abomination of desolation, mentioned in Daniel 9:27 in Matthew 24:15, and the Great Tribulation in Matthew 24:21, this implies that the two witnesses minister during the latter half of the tribulation. Another example is found in Revelation 11:7, which states that the beast that emerges from the abyss will be allowed to murder the two witnesses. This beast represents the Antichrist, who is empowered by the dragon or Satan. The dragon descends from heaven to serve as the abyss's angel. The Antichrist appears in the middle of the tribulation and grows violent in the latter half of the tribulation. This means that the two witnesses die in the latter half of the tribulation, as the first half is a period of peace. However, Revelation 19:15-18 reveals that at the end of the tribulation, Jesus returns and defeats the Antichrist's armies. The Antichrist and the world's forces will be completely denied freedom by Jesus. Jesus will destroy anyone who comes to fight him.
The Antichrist, who will rule for 3.5 years. And then we're told he's killed or assassinated. This is in Revelation chapter 13. And by the way, the Bible is so specific, it tells us where his wound is. It's his right arm and his right eye. That is in Zechariah 11:17. So if you missed the rapture and you want to know the future, be looking out for that guy that's got an eye patch probably, and who has something wrong with his right arm. Okay? Because the Bible is very specific.
The rise of Antichrist. The next thing, according to Robert Breaker, that is going to take place after the rapture is the rise of the Antichrist. And how exactly is he going to take all the power? The term Antichrist refers to someone who opposes Christ and seeks to take his place. When used in 1 John, it refers to anyone who rejects the message of Christ as taught in the Scriptures. That would include false teachers, false prophets, and those who deny Christ's deity and humanity, as well as his substitutionary atonement and physical resurrection. Many cults and fake religions are anti-Christ, so the spirit of the Antichrist is a false doctrine when it comes to Jesus Christ. However, at the end, there will be a single entity who will be called the Antichrist. The Bible is very precise on the character of the Antichrist, and the image it creates is horrific. The book of Daniel contains the most extensive information where the Antichrist's mouth is often emphasized. He will constantly boast about himself. He will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. His fate is to be given a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies. First and foremost, he will be arrogant and blasphemous. He will be tenacious and reckless in his determination to get his way. He will disregard human customs and, of course, adjust the calendar so that it is no longer associated with the birth of Jesus. According to Robert Breaker, the rapture itself is expected to be the moment that propels the Antichrist to prominence. This is because the rapture will bring widespread chaos and terror. The Antichrist, fueled by Satan, will appear to have all of the solutions to the world's problems. He will take over the European Union by cunning intrigue, establishing his headquarters in Rome. The 7-year tribulation will begin when the Antichrist negotiates a pact that will bring true peace to the Middle East and allow the Jews to rebuild their temple. With his European base solidified and peace restored in the Middle East, he will set out to conquer the entire world. The world will resist him, and the result will be a third world war in which he will destroy to an extraordinary degree. This war will initially result in the death of 1/4 of humanity, or 1.5 billion people in today's terms. As the tribulation approaches its midpoint, this war will escalate into a nuclear holocaust that will result in the deaths of an additional 1/3 of those still alive, another 1.5 billion. It will be an empty victory because in the process of his conquest, 1/3 of the earth will be destroyed and half its population will be killed. He will then consolidate his victory by instituting a one-world economy and a one-world religion. However, as the Antichrist becomes obsessed with the Jews, he loses interest in his global empire, and segments of that empire begin to revolt. The core of the revolt is centered in the Asian nations, which raise a 200 million army and send it marching across Asia to Israel, where they hope to engage the Antichrist in a decisive battle for their freedom. At the end, in Revelation 19:20, John confirms that the Antichrist and the false prophet will be thrown into the lake of fire which burns with brimstone, where they will be tormented day and night forever and ever.
Tribulation in Matthew 24. And they will be protected. Rules 3.5 years. At the same time, there's 2 witnesses there for 3.5 years. I'm sure he's like, I hate those guys, man. I sure hope I can kill them. After 1,260 days, or 3.5 years, he finally gets the victory over them and kills them. But then he's assassinated. Then somehow he comes back, Satan incarnate. And for the last 3.5 years, the devil is ruling. But somewhere in the middle, right here, the devil comes in.
The 7-year tribulation will begin when the Antichrist negotiates a pact that will bring true peace to the Middle East and allow the Jews to rebuild their temple. With his European base solidified and peace restored in the Middle East, he will set out to conquer the entire world. The world will resist him, and the result will be a third world war in which he will destroy to an extraordinary degree. This war will initially result in the death of 1/4 of humanity, or 1.5 billion people in today's terms. As the tribulation approaches its midpoint, this war will escalate into a nuclear holocaust that will result in the deaths of an additional 1/3 of those still alive, another 1.5 billion. It will be an empty victory because in the process of his conquest, 1/3 of the earth will be destroyed and half its population will be killed. He will then consolidate his victory by instituting a one-world economy and a one-world religion. However, as the Antichrist becomes obsessed with the Jews, he loses interest in his global empire, and segments of that empire begin to revolt. The core of the revolt is centered in the Asian nations, which raise a 200 million army and send it marching across Asia to Israel, where they hope to engage the Antichrist in a decisive battle for their freedom. At the end, in Revelation 19:20, John confirms that the Antichrist and the false prophet will be thrown into the lake of fire which burns with brimstone, where they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. In our lifetime, no one knows except God himself, but they could, so we should keep a tight eye on everything. After all, the chess pieces appear to be set on the board in preparation for such a war.
And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Now, in the world today, we don't have a lot of kings. But the Queen just died. Now we have a new king of England. There's 1 king. I guess you just need 9 more, right? Interesting. These have 1 mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. What's the 1 mind? But it says, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And you keep reading down there.
The 10 kings versus Jesus Christ. Another important event that will take place after the rapture are the 10 kings who will also rise to prominence with the Antichrist. Those 10 kings will be against Jesus Christ, and they will fight him. However, Jesus will take over in the end, marking the start of a new era. Knowing that the beast represents the Antichrist, who wields governmental authority during the second half of the Great Tribulation, helps us understand the 10 horns. Daniel asserts that the 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. Revelation confirms this. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet gotten a kingdom, but will obtain authority as kings for 1 hour alongside the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb. Be sure that the Lamb here is Jesus Christ. So the rising of the 10 rulers anticipates the entrance of the Antichrist at the beginning of the tribulation. However, near the midpoint of the tribulation, the death and resurrection of the Antichrist kills 3 of these rulers. From that point forward, the Antichrist will govern the globe alone, with the 7 remaining kings surrendering power to him. The church will not be present on earth throughout these occurrences. We are evacuated from the world before the tribulation begins. Though the church may be there for the advent of the 10 kings, we will not witness the coming of the Antichrist or the beginning of the tribulation. Our belief is that the Antichrist will emerge from a revived Roman Empire in the final days. That empire will be divided into 10 pieces, each governed by a king who will serve under the Antichrist. These 10 monarchs, represented by horns, freely hand over power to the one world leader, the Antichrist. These kings will wage war against Jesus and his followers. Regardless of their strength and authority, these 10 rulers will be defeated when Jesus Christ returns. However, the good news for believers is that they will not have to face the horrors of the Antichrist. We are never taught to watch for the Antichrist. Instead, we are told to look for Jesus Christ. According to 1 Thessalonians 1:10, believers are waiting for Jesus to return and deliver us from the wrath to come. That is a wonderful promise. That is why Paul calls the rapture our blessed hope and instructs us to comfort one another with the promise of the rapture. Let us know what your thoughts are on this in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, then make sure to like the video. And do not forget to subscribe to our channel to keep up with the most amazing content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.